Hello Internet, I'm Jackie Fox, and hello Palworld fans. If you're like me, you've seen a number of tips and tricks videos, and I've seen quite a few. But the reason you should watch this one is because I took notes on all those videos, compared competing strategies to each other, picked out the best and the simplest as well as the ones that were least likely to get patched through or felt least abusive to the game, while also testing all of these within the newest patch environment, because most Palworld tips and tricks videos were popular when the game, shortly after the game came out, so they're all a month old now, and some of them, spoiler alert, don't work because of the patches or work differently because of the patches, and some actually work better because of the patches and give you additional things you can do. So I'm going to be organizing the tips and tricks as some of the most eclectic, some of the ones that I saw the least, some of the ones that maybe I was adding the most to, or some of the ones that I think it's least likely for you to notice, so that people who watched a bunch of tips and tricks videos can get a lot of information here at the beginning, and eventually you can drop out. But even with some of the more common and simple strategies, I added a bunch of diverse information about how to, say, with the Katava strategy for increasing your carry rate. A lot of people who mention that don't really talk about how you can do that later in the game with even better pals, and whether it's worth condensing them to make that even better. And spoiler alert, you can increase your carry capacity by up to 800 pounds using this method, while most people only really talk about the 250 you can get from your first 5 Kativa. Big difference. So if you want to learn the nuances of some of even the more simple stuff like that, keep watching, like and subscribe, let's get into it. And this isn't necessarily one that I super recommend, and it's definitely not a gamer move, not a very diplomatic move, let me say, in a shared world. But not only can you capture a merchant, but if you deploy them at your base, you can trade with them at the cost of one of your PAL slots. You can put them back in the PAL box when you don't want to trade with them, but I just kind of let him have his freedom. I mean, he is kind of my slave. It doesn't work from your party though, so you can't just carry him around and trade with him anywhere. He wants to have a home, and he complains about, OSHA and stuff, and threatens to call the Free PAL Alliance when you try to trade with him from party. He'll just run away from you. It just doesn't work. But also, the other thing about this is you are kidnapping an NPC in the game, and while I definitely accidentally blasted him to death with a shotgun, he respawned. But once I captured him, he no longer respawns. I don't know if that might change in some way, or maybe this part of this will get patched, but honestly, a lot of this works too smoothly for it not to be a thing that was intended. I mean, they already kind of referenced the fact that you can sell humans, and they definitely didn't make it not possible. That being said, there isn't really much reward for catching humans in this game. Except for this. This is the one human catching strategy that actually really can be handy. After you catch him, you'll likely need to respawn or allow yourself to die, because otherwise the PDIF will doggedly pursue you. After all, you just did an illegal thing in a town. So they essentially, the police bodyguard capitalism more than anything else, the ownership class, so they're protecting their merchants, they're protecting trade. But even if you fast travel into your base, they will follow you. Even if raids don't affect your base because nothing can spawn near it, they will spawn inside of your base, within the boundaries of it. That being said, if this is later game, well, this can be kind of devastating early game because they have assault rifles and stuff. Later game, you can pretty easily body them right back, and as long as you personally don't engage, you won't get additional crimes. It'll just be your pals committing crimes. That's legal, apparently, and then after they kill them off, the wanted level seems to go away. Okay, so I talked about Phalaris in my previous video on breeding the tower bosses, and Phalaris is pretty awesome. But also, Phalaris is a big boy. There's some other disadvantages here, and I think Ragnarok is a little bit faster, or at least I started using Ragnarok around the time I learned the Swift trick, which we'll talk about later in this video, as it's a little bit simpler. But I was actually surprised at how much of a difference it makes that Ragnarok is smaller. It's roughly player size, so as a worker it's less likely to glitch into the ceilings. and all sorts of weird things that the bigger, higher flyers do when they're cooking ingots and stuff. I had this problem a lot on certain base designs with Phalaris. I had to build really weird things on my bases to accommodate Phalaris, but Ragnarok seems to be fine with this. But more importantly, this guy's so small I can fly through a door. I mean, this blew my mind, that this guy can fly through a doorway while I'm on it. It's ridiculous. So, naturally, since this guy can get through anything you can get through, you can fly through basically the entirety of a dungeon on the back of a Ragnarok so much faster than you would possibly imagine. So I would say for that reason alone, because the work skills aren't any different than Phalaris, and you know, they're roughly similar creatures, just the ability to blast through a dungeon on a Ragnarok where you can't do that with a Phalaris, I would say makes it a much better pal. Okay, so quick revive. You may have noticed this if you have bees on your base, they'll explode when you get raided, but then even if you don't really do anything, they'll still kind of heal up. It'll say they have a major injury, and then shortly after they'll have a minor injury, and then they'll be fine. So what happens here is one of your other pals with transporting is going to pick them up, put them on a bed, and at that point they're going to start to recover their health. This is a lot faster than putting them in your pal box, which is a 10-minute penalty. But it's also not the fastest way to do this, because you can instant revive by placing your fainted pals in a viewing cage. They'll instantly revive back to 1 HP and begin to regenerate health from there. But viewing cages aren't just pal centers, they're also a great way to store extra pals because of your breeding or condensing projects where you need 64 of something in particular, and it's taking up all the room in your pal box. But they're also a great place to store a single species that you're working on for those types of projects, or a place to put all of your special pals with really cool traits, or the ones that you've trained up, or ones you've invested souls into, ones you've condensed, so that they don't get mixed in when you do the sorting from your pal box, which is a pretty neat tip in and of itself. You can also glitch your way inside of one of these by abusing mounts to clip into it, and now you're the pal and nothing can hurt you. There are 3 ways to make sure your cake doesn't expire, 2 of which work on other foods. The one that doesn't, though, is putting it on a breeding farm. This can also potentially take up a lot of space. You could just leave it or other foods on the cooktop, but the most complicated and one of the most powerful methods is to set your server settings to drop only your items upon death, go to a remote place in your base, respawn into your base, leaving a bag there. Everything in that bag will not expire, at least until you take it out. So, kind of an infinite refrigerator that requires no cooling, at the cost of having to fiddle with your game settings a little bit. And really, because of the way that death drops work, I don't see that one changing. And with a lot of the things that feel like using the game in an unintended way that's not necessarily abusive, I think these are going to stick around, and that's why I kept them in this video. While you're breeding, though, there are a few highly ideal passives or passive groupings that become useful for different types of pals. Getting this set of passives on any one pal will greatly reduce breeding efforts in the long term and yield highly specialized pals for very minimal cake. So for all of your non-ranch base pals, anyone who's doing some type of work, whether it be working in a garden, or working with water, or working with fire, or working with their hands, people who are cutting down trees or mining, any of these guys are going to appreciate Workaholic. For a lot of those types of pals as well, they're also going to appreciate additionally Serious, Work Slave, and even Artisan. Artisan and Serious are ones that really pump up the work speed especially, while the other ones keep them sane over longer work periods. And then Lucky is also pretty good here. It's not as big of a work speed boost as some of these other buffs, but it does also increase their attack, so it kind of makes them more well-rounded. If they're just staying on your base though, you may not need the extra offensive power. Offensive pals have a diverse set of builds, but consider Legend, Musclehead, Burly Body, perhaps Lucky here as well, and maybe even an Elemental booster if you have one from one of the legendaries especially, but the other ones are pretty decent as well. There's a lot more options here as well, but a lot of them are very specific. For Ranch Pals, generally speaking, a lot of passives don't really do anything with them, so maybe just like Diet Lover, Swift, Dainty Eater, and Runner, so that they eat as little as possible and they can get to their feed box as quickly as possible, so they spend more time in the grazing mode, which is going to have them dropping items. For faster mounts, the passives you want are Nimble for a 10% increase, Runner or Legend for a 20% increase, and Swift for a 30% increase. Additionally, the following mounts, Dire Howl, Nightwing, Arsox, Raindrix, Rayhound, Kitsun, Serpentera, Fingellip, Jormuntide, Palladius, and Necromus all gain speed from leveling their partner skill. They get 10% at 1 star, 12% at 2 stars, 15% at 3 stars, and 20% at 4 stars. So you'll notice they get a lot of it for that first 4 and not much for everything else. So if you want to really increase the speed of one of these guys, you can get a 10% bonus from this, and you can stack the other ones for a combination of, what's that, 80... So 90% additional speed between doing all of those things. That would be pretty intense. For gliders, it seems that the only non-technical way, and we'll talk about the technical ways a little bit later, to increase their overall speed is through leveling their partner skill. It's kind of unfortunate, and also there isn't really a scaling table I can show you for this, because there's a lot more factors in how gliders work than just speed, where it is for flying mounts. And they all are very different and work in very different ways and level in very different ways. Tombat's partner skill locates nearby pals and shows you what direction they're in. Very helpful for hunting specific breeds. The Legend passive is gained from in-game bosses Frostalion, Jetragon, Necromus, and Palladius, while Lucky can be gained from any shiny pal and is possible far earlier in comparison. Both can be passed down during breeding, however, Lucky does not make the children larger than usual, the way it does with the shiny pal that you got it from. Speaking of range pals, Sibelex, High Quality Cloth, Mao and Mao Christ, Cold Hard Cash, and to a lesser extent Vixie are the best passive income farmers in the game, either farming you gold directly or items with a solid sale value. Wouldn't necessarily sell any of Vixie's spheres though. Save them for when you unlock the homing launcher at level 50 if you feel like you have too many at any point in the game. Just throw them in a box, you'll thank me later. Other helpful ranch pals are Flambell if you're looking for fire organs, which come in handy throughout the game, Beeguard for honey, Chickpea for eggs, Mosarina for milk. Those three are going to be important for making cakes for breeding. All ranch pals increase the amount that they drop at a time, or in Vixie's case, sometimes also the item quality, as they're condensed and as their partner skill level rises. Gobfin and Gobfin Ingus boost player attack, and this affects stacks while they're in the party, so you can get that boost up to 5 times. Also, as a partner skill, this also increases the more they're condensed. This is a thing that you technically used to be able to do, but it was awkward because you had to cue the pal sphere, then jump, then glide to trigger this, which is kind of difficult. Now you can actually natively toss a pal spear or two from Gale Claw while you're gliding, although the aiming is going to be really sus. That being said, you can fire multiple with launchers pretty quickly as well. And combined with the level 50 homing launcher tech, you may actually capture a few pals before you even hit the ground. For the next couple of tips, you need to know that glider skill or glider speed is modified by momentum. So how do you build up momentum to go really fast on a glider, you say? Basic way is sliding. To slide, you want to run down a hill. So you have to be sprinting, and then you hold the roll or crouch button, and you should begin sliding. While you're sliding, jump and glide, and you'll be shocked at how much faster and further you end up going. With the grappling gun, you can also grapple and then cancel mid-grapple, so the combination of things that you need to do is grapple, cancel, then jump, then glide into a super glide, but frankly, I think I'll just fly or fast travel instead. This is just too much to set up, and I feel like it gets defeated really easily by lag, or I'm just really bad at it. In any case, Yeah, I have other options. My Ragnarok is plenty fast. The homing launcher itself can hit targets you can't even see or that you aren't even aiming at, and sometimes it can't hit the thing you're aiming at until it catches the thing that you can't see. It's weird. But it will briefly cue a spear below a POW that's being caught, and if they happen to pop out while that spear is circling below them, it will hit them naturally. It's kind of waiting on them. And also tends to fail in a very similar way against flying POWs unless you get them to come down by aggroing them, because it'll just kind of fly in a circle below them at where they would be if you had aggroed them. You might be able to make up for this by throwing the spear from above them, maybe while you're on a mount, or maybe, I don't know, using a cliffside. But, you know, generally getting the aggro first is probably the way to go there. Also, trying to do this from a mount isn't particularly reliable because, as I kind of mentioned before, the homing launcher has a bit of a mind of its own sometimes. Digtoys' partner skill was buffed in recent patches, so with its headband, it's one of the fastest ways to mine in the game now. A lot of people know that, but here are a few of the more efficient alternatives. Not necessarily more efficient than Digtoys, but a few other options. Mammoreth's Earthquake type skill, while it's mounted, will level everything around you. Maybe not destroying everything, but hit it a couple times and you'll be surprised how many things you can destroy. Astegon, while you're mounted, has basically mining lasers and just destroys things very fast. And then if you want to cut through rocks of all sizes, get yourself a sword. Now this is comparable in damage and the speed that it can take down most rocks to Lily's spear, however you don't need high quality cloth to repair it, and it's just way easier to craft, way cheaper to craft for you, and way easier to repair. The only drawback here is that you unlock the sword at a much higher level, so probably use Lily's spear in the meantime, because even though it's not specialized for mining, it still does more damage than the refined pickaxe in most cases. Dark POWs don't sleep. This means not only that they work more, but they're your only overnight workers aside from your active POW. This also means that they tend to get depressed super easy and really benefit from being workaholics, or serious. And now you know why Depresso looks like that most of the time. Unfortunately for this next tip, I can't verify this on Xbox for sad and unfortunately obvious reasons, but on PC, you can reset the end alpha boss of a dungeon by retreating before engaging with it and going back a fair distance. So if you have Ragnarok, for instance, you can use the tip I gave you previously to just easily enough fly straight back to the entrance. Some have said that it's until it autosaves. Others have talked about a specific room that oddly enough only exists in some dungeons, so I don't know where I'm finding a skeleton in some of these things. But I guess that worked in certain early game dungeons. I definitely made it all the way back to the entrance and came back and it was a different alpha PAL. So this definitely seems to work on PC and should work on Xbox whenever they patch it enough that you can do dungeons. Dungeons are also an incredible place for finding ores of various types, and usually a variety that's kind of above the local area's level. So if you're usually only finding like regular copper ore around you, you have a chance of finding sulfur, you have a chance of finding coal. And this is a good way of getting things like that early on in the game. But you can also easily find things like quartz as well, and another thing that's only going to be here are paldium rocks that drop 40 paldium and even a little bit of copper ore. I would advise that you set up a box or two outside of the mouth of the dungeon unless it happens to be near a fast travel point, like really near a fast travel point, but even then you probably want to set up a box because there's way more rocks here than your carry weight could possibly be. Even if you use all of the tricks in this video and put all of your player points into it, I don't think you could possibly carry out every rock in the dungeon, and if you're low on resources, you might want to. So build a couple treasure chests for yourself. Undershirts can give you an additional or a more diverse temperature resistance. So if you're wearing heat resistant armor and you have a cold resistant undershirt, depending on how high the levels of those things are and where you're going, you have resistance to extremes of both temperatures. If you can get this up to like level 2 or 3, you should be able to resist most places on the map. You can buy a heat undershirt at the Fisherman's Pier, and you can buy both of these at Dune Shelter, but you're going to be finding the higher level ones as dungeon rewards. Keeping an extra base open can allow you to set up PAL Box as a temporary fast travel point. This could also allow you to build a base just outside of a boss spawn point for certain cheesing strats, like, for instance, the one I mentioned earlier about how you can get into a viewing cage for your own safety. As long as you can get your PAL outside of the viewing cage, it can fight without you really being attacked. And if you are the one drawing the aggro, your PAL can potentially get left alone. There is a special trick to actually making your pals use your refrigerator. I know a lot of people get really frustrated about pals putting things all over their base, but at least with expirable items, they will only place them in one of two places, a feed box or a refrigerator. The problem is your feed boxes are generally in flux, but with the following strategy, you can keep them going to the refrigerator every time. Fill every one of your feed boxes with a large stack of your preferred PAL food. I find either the berry toast, or if you want to be a little bit more bougie, salad are really your best options here. And then fill the remaining slots with at least one of either honey or cotton candy. On a cake baking base, honey is actually less reliable here, as you may accidentally empty out your feed boxes while using your honey to make cakes. Therefore, cotton candy is preferable in general and can be farmed from Woolapop. They're also a ranch pal, so you can catch yourself a Woolapop and just have it make you cotton candy. You're probably not going to use very much of it, and it lasts forever. You can kill or even catch a Mammorest and some other pals super early by placing a campfire under their feet and catching them on fire. This doesn't seem to work as well as it used to because of better PAL pathing, which seems to have applied also to enemy pals. But you can still do this at night, do a sleeping Mammorest, and catching fire won't even wake it up. This strat is mainly important because up until the point where you attempt to catch it, even if it wakes up, which again it won't, you will have gained no aggro from the Mammorest. So good luck surviving at level 5 if you fail that first catch. Just keep throwing bowls and trying to cancel its attacks. You can also scale up the damage of this strategy with multiple campfires. However, temperature increases do stack now, even from a single source. So unlike when this strat was developed, now you need to know that adding multiple fires will require increasingly more heat resistance for you to endure as well, so don't end up dying here before the Mammorest. Oh yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, you can sometimes cancel an attack mid-cast, even mid-animation. I've seen twisters freeze in motion by putting a PAL into a sphere, either by using it to try to catch them or by putting your PAL back into its sphere. This is a way of catch canceling that works either offensively or defensively, and you may even find it to be key in saving you from one of the most frustrating moments in Palworld, where your PAL demolishes the thing you're trying to catch before you can catch it. This strat also makes the Mammorest a little bit easier than normal to catch because of the burning effect. Each effect like this that you put on a PAL will make it easier to catch, and they do stack. Burning and poison are the easiest to apply through skill fruits or player arrows, and last longer than others, making for optimal stacking as opposing to frozen or stun, etc. While you're at it, you can also take advantage of the back bonus to boost your catch rate even higher. This is the best use for fire and poison bows, especially in the later game. Skill fruit builds to make note of. So the first one of these I want to mention is Ignis Blast or Fireball, or really anything that inflicts burn, and Poison Blast or something that inflicts poison. With both of these skills on basically any PAL, you have maximum damage over time and maximum catch rate up, essentially, and a free skill slot for something else if you want. There's also what you could call a slow spam. This is abusing skills that have almost no cooldown. So since you have 3 basically no cooldown skills, if you're always pressing all of them and always spamming all of them, you're always going to be firing off probably 1 to 2 of them. And you're going to notice that this is only going to work while you're mounted, because your PAL, while it is also going to benefit from the lower cooldown time and probably will put out damage rather reliably and rather quickly, these are pretty weak skills. And really the thing that's chipping them down quickly is the fact that they're getting hit by so many of them. Which means that this can be a really cool build if you kind of time things right for chipping something down to a really optimal catching strength. The one problem here is Ignis Blast being a part of this could apply the burning effect, and that could prevent you from catching something with it because it could get taken out by the fire damage. Although in the short term, while this is riskier, it also increases the catch rate, so go for it. The nuke set, which is basically how can I do the most damage while kind of ignoring or factoring in those casting times and such. We have Fireball, Blizzard Spike, and Rock Lance. And then a bunch of honorable mentions for just being really interesting skills that you can get from Skill Fruit that maybe you should try out on an appropriate PAL. Seed Mine, Bubble Blast, Plasma Tornado, and basically all of the breath skills. Pretty cool. The PAL box reaches out about 7 foundations in all directions. This makes your base a 14 to 15 foundation diameter. You can use this information to set a level and even foundation before even setting your PAL box, which allows you to set your PAL box on the foundation. You want to start this foundation at the highest point, or the average height if you're okay with some hills. This way you can have the PAL box on a foundation, and this also means that you have practically infinite ability to build upwards from that point. You can build your base into pretty much a skyscraper. You don't, however, want to overlap any resource spawns that you'd like to farm, so if this is an ore or coal base, you want to build around those things and give your pals some stair steps down into those, or some way to be able to get to them and get out of them easily. But as long as these aren't too wide, like, yeah, maybe 2 width max for structural reasons above you, you should be able to build solid structures above you. So those are areas that you would want to leave open as you're building in the 14x14 area. A stack of benches can become a spiral staircase with highly customizable and potentially pretty smooth animation to walk on. And this could be kind of necessary for some builds where you're trying to connect 2 different foundations that were set at 2 different levels. In theory, you could do this with a lot of items, but benches are kind of the easiest to walk over. To reset the grappling gun cooldown, you have a couple of options. You could equip it and unequip it, and that will remove the cooldown. Or you could craft and equip all 4 of them, and then just cycle them. For an infinite, if not range inconsistent way of having no cooldowns to speak of. Perhaps the best use for a grappling gun is to help you move around even when you are vastly overburdened. The second option would be respawning to base, at least if death drops are off, otherwise you're not really bringing much with you. Vixie, found earliest near this boss settlement and around that area in general, a little further towards the middle, is one of the best early game ranch pals because it finds you pal spheres, among other things, for free. After you raise its partner skill, it can find megaspheres, which should be useful even into the late game. Many minor and even enduring glitches can be fixed by returning to the home screen and re-entering the game. If you need to reset local spawns or the wares of a PAL merchant or black marketeer, you can fast travel away and return, or you can fast travel away and back to that point, or return to the title and load back in, whichever happens to be easier. Many people know that Katava increases your carry weight, and many also know that this effect stacks, and even that it increases with its stars. But it's not the only PAL like this, it's just the first that you encounter in the game. Lunaris, Broncherry Aqua, King Paka, Ice King Paka, Wumpo, and Wumpo Botan also do this to increasing effects, though several of these pals unfortunately require their saddles to be crafted to unlock the effect. The best case scenario is 5 5-star Wumpo to increase your carry weight by 800 units. It is worth noting though, 5 1-star Wumpos can help you lift an extra 600 units, so I'm not sure that all that condensing and breeding is actually worth it. Quick stack. So this is the right button on Xbox. I think of it as R1 because I'm more of a Sony person. It's the fastest way to clean out your inventory into your boxes on base. So instead of moving items individually, quick stack will move all the items in your inventory and stack them on top of things that are in your box. If it's not in your box, it won't pull it from your inventory. So, as long as there aren't pal spheres in your box, you'll keep all the pal spheres in your inventory, etc., etc. So that's a pretty useful way to save yourself a lot of time in sorting your resources. Mining 1 pals will only mine stone. Now, this is technically a source of a diverse set of things that you need early in the game, but it is worth pointing out that mining 2 can mine anything: coal, palladium, quartz, copper, stone, and sulfur. Mining 3, and better, just does it faster. Your active pal is your extra base member, and can be assigned to tasks. Later in the game, it's helpful to hold pals like Anubis and Ragnarok in your party for crafting or cooking assistance anytime, anywhere. And this one, we finally got to the point of obviousness where the game is actually telling you about it, but since it happens kind of slowly, it can be hard to know exactly what's happening here. But defensive walls are basically anything that are placed outside of your base, at least wholly. As long as a good portion of it is inside of your base, it should be immune to this, will slowly degrade. Their health will slowly chip away until eventually they just disappear. It takes several days, if not weeks, for this to happen, and can be slowed down by changing your settings. It can even be turned off all the way if you want to build outside of your base. And this can be helpful because trying to put all of your walls inside of the walls of your base severely limits the amount of usable space you have inside of your base. It's far easier to set those types of walls outside of your base, so this is probably one of the settings that you want to turn off to kind of fix that problem. And again, like the game tells you this is going to happen, but this is really more of a tip because it is fixable. And actually, while we're at it, the last tip, and one that has been subject of a lot of videos recently, is that you can go into your settings to change the setting so that you can just toggle work type interactions on and off instead of having to hold the button for the entire time that you're working. And if you learned something here today, especially if you learned a lot, there was about 45 by my counting, but maybe I'll split some of these up because I did put multiple types of information into some of these. Around 50 tips. If this was one of the better tip videos that you've seen for Palworld, let me know. I appreciate it. Appreciate your comments. Let me know if you have any tips that I missed, anything that you thought was glaringly obvious that I happened to miss. And other than that, like and subscribe. There's a link in the description to lead you to all sorts of other Jackie Fox content. I welcome you to the other corners of the internet in which I reside. And with all of that being said, I'll see you in the next one.